Sorry. Can you hear us now? Somebody say yes. Okay, sorry about that.
Okay, that's all right. So we conducted learning sessions, we conducted listening sessions with city members, we consulted various forms of publicly available information. We had lots and lots of conversations with lots of individuals and groups in Decorah. And all of this has culminated in the 36-page report that we have shared with you. The report is available on the MEU Task Force Dropbox, and I did bring a couple of extra copies if anybody wants paper copies, but they are publicly available. We've got both the report itself and the recommendations and factors for Decorah City Council to consider. At our last meeting in December, we did ultimately, well, on 2 meetings ago, we voted to approve the content of the report itself. And then at our last meeting, we held another meeting where we discussed these things extensively and ended on these recommendations. And so we did have a unanimous vote in favor of recommending that the city does pursue a municipal electric utility, but that is accompanied by a series of recommendations that we encourage the city council to consider. So we've got 10 factors there. And so I could read these if you wanted me to, or I could answer questions. What
I would go ahead and read through them.
Okay. All right. I'll read just the recommendation though, not
Yes,
the report. Okay. The report itself does have a handy 2-page summary. And so if you wanted to skim the first 2 pages, the executive summary, you would get a sense of some of the information that we covered. The report has a part that examines potential advantages and disadvantages, focusing on the education sessions that we held, publicly available information, listening sessions. And then part 2 of the report examines the feasibility. And so more technical information is in that part 2 of the report. And then part 3 of the report includes some balancing of advantages, disadvantages, and some discussion of uncertainty, some discussion of things that we just cannot right now answer. And so those things are addressed in the report itself. The recommendation itself, the Decorah Municipal Electric Utility Task Force recommends that the city of Decorah hold a referendum on municipalization at a time of its choosing. In addition, the following are factors that we encourage the city council to consider, both as they decide whether to hold a new referendum on municipalization and during the process of developing an application to the Iowa Utilities Board if there were to be a positive referendum on municipalization. And so we've got 10 factors here. Number 1, if a referendum is planned, we encourage the city council to carefully analyze community priorities as they consider the timing of a referendum. Number 2, if the city intends to take any further steps in the process of municipalization, we encourage the creation of a MEU contingency fund, including franchise fees, general budget contributions, and other sources. Number 3, if a referendum is planned, council should take a clear stand on this issue and make the case to the community that municipalization is likely in the best interest of Decorah. Number 4, if a referendum is planned, we encourage the city council to clearly state the reasons for pursuing municipalization. Number 5, if a referendum is planned, consider asking the Iowa Utilities Board for information oversight. That's a specific thing in quotes. Given what they've stated in past dockets and in the most recent complaint ruling, they may be willing to engage in oversight of campaign-related communications. Number 6, net metering for customer-owned solar energy generation is important to the Decorah community. City officials, and especially a municipal electric utility board, if the city establishes one, are encouraged to consider maintaining net metering for customers. Number 7, Decorah City Council should carefully consider the language used in a referendum. Council may want to seek advice from Attorney Lynch regarding referendum language to include and issues such as whether to include a broad purpose statement. Number 8, if the city decides to pursue next steps in the municipalization process, the city will need to devote the resources to commissioning a new or updated feasibility study. It may be in the city's best interest to commission this feasibility study after a positive referendum result, making it more likely that the Iowa Utilities Board would be willing to compel Alliant to share the data necessary for generating a reliable feasibility study. In those circumstances, we encourage the city to consider consulting with Nugent Berg for technical support and potentially LEV Associates. Number 9, the city of Decorah will need to retain legal counsel if they intend to move further in this process. We encourage the city to select legal counsel carefully. This task force has been impressed with the quality of David Lynch's advice, and we encourage consideration given to retaining Lynch's counsel and or others from Brown Winnick. And number 10, the process of municipalization, if the city decides to pursue it, will undoubtedly not be quick. Under these circumstances, city officials will need to continue to be alert to other considerations that could arise where they might have reason to think that a municipal electric utility or Alliant would be better prepared to deal with those future challenges.
Okay, council. Or,
I'm happy to answer questions or call on any of
okay.
the other task force members.
My first comment is just thank you. And thank you to all the members of the task force. This was an incredibly well-written final report that demonstrated 2 years of really hard, thoughtful work. And I'm so impressed with everything you have put before us and the detail that in some ways makes our decision process easier in terms of, you allowed us to sit back while you did the hard labor of getting all of this information. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'd have to say the educational sessions that you not only recorded and made available, but you've categorized them and outlined them and made them very friendly for the community to use. I think that's outstanding work. I appreciate that so much.
Thank you for that plug. All those videos are still available on the Municipal Electric Utility Task Force Dropbox folder on the city's website. So I definitely encourage everybody to watch those videos, but also to read the actual report. We worked
Yes.
really hard. We put lots of words in there. We hope you will read them.
I would like to echo the comments of my 2 previous council people. You guys have spent 2 years doing a tremendous job of compiling a bunch of information together that if the community has any questions as to whether they're for an MEU or against an MEU, I think most of those questions have been answered by this report. I would encourage the members of the community to read this report, take the time to do it. These people have spent a lot of time compiling it, and it's well worth your time to read it if you have any questions in reference to it. And the other thing I'd like to request from people to do is if they see any of you out in public, please thank you guys for the tremendous effort you guys have put in for 2 years to compile this information. The city owes you a debt of gratitude. Thank you.
I think just to make it clear, especially on our website, that you'll find it under commissions. You go to the MEU task force, you look down, you can see all the documentation that they have in there, including the report and the recommendation and all of the links to be able to go in and look at all of the sessions that you had.
And the report and the recommendations should be right at the top of the folder now.
Okay.
So you shouldn't have to dig through it. It should be pretty easy to find.
Okay. Need to call the
Yeah,
council?
I'll just,
Oh, go ahead.
okay. I'll just say that those of you who are put off by the length of the report, I think it was the committee's intention or the task force intention to be thorough and to show their entire hand. That is to sort of push back against any perception out there that they might be biased, or they might have come in here with a pre-baked conclusion. They lay out all their research, all their reasoning in pretty careful and thorough detail. 33 pages of reading sounds like a lot, but it's pretty engaging and interesting. I certainly learned a lot through this process, but I was glad to have this summary at the end to sort of lay out what we learned as a community. So I'll echo the thanks as well. Obviously, I've said that before, but I have a question also for her, if that's okay. My question is, I know not all of us were able to listen to the MU task force as it deliberated on the substance of the recommendations. And I thought that the conversation about the first recommendation was particularly important, the timing recommendation, that the councils carefully consider the timing of community priorities or whatever in considering when to hold a referendum. And I'm curious if you could say some more about that for the benefit of everyone who maybe doesn't remember perfectly or who wasn't there. What kinds of factors should we be considering in terms of the timing?
Sure. Yeah. So that was a sentiment that was expressed by many on the task force, but it was also one that was echoed in some of the community listening sessions that we had. And I think the biggest concern was that somehow that this effort could potentially compete with efforts around the school and the North Alley plan. And so there's clearly a lot of sentiment and energy around the issue related to the new John Klein School. And I'm not up to date on that issue, but there was we wanted to make sure that this issue did not detract from that issue. And so we just wanted to put that in the context that whatever priorities the city has, we just didn't want this to be perceived as detracting from that.
Just a minute. I wanted to check with Travis a minute. Travis, any comments about process or what you might see as far as how we look at this and work with it?
My assumption with this is council didn't want to necessarily deliberate the whole thing in a council meeting in this setting.
Correct.
So my assumption was that this would be taken up at a work session, standalone work session at a later date and time.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope that we deliberate a little bit on this in terms of, I think we need to deliberate enough that we are prepared to go into our budget season with an understanding of where we're going to put our energy towards this year. And so my only concern is that, and so, I mean, we have a very short agenda tonight. I am hoping we can talk enough tonight to have a roadmap of where we're going rather than putting this off until February. I am curious. I don't know how many people have read the report, so it is hard to talk, at length about this without reading the report. But I think it says a lot that the task force has recommended that we move forward with referendum. I think timing is important. There's been some indication from the utility board that Alliant might be looking for a rate increase this spring. I think that timing is important as we consider this, because those two things happening at the same time might be beneficial. The couple of thoughts that I have in my mind is this idea of, I really appreciate the recommendation that this is council's baby at this point. And we need to be able to come to a place together of why this is beneficial for Decorah. Both the vote, which is the scary part actually, right? We don't want to see a repeat of last time. I'm not interested in watching my community tear itself apart over another referendum, but I am interested in then how do we as council members articulate our vision and our desire for this vote and the potential for an MEU well enough that our constituents can see that this isn't a divisive issue. If you're really looking for the best interest of Decorah, and a trust issue about what does it mean to actually have a referendum, right? A referendum does not necessarily mean that this Decorah City Council is going to spend millions of taxpayer money going after something that's a pipe dream. It gives us an opportunity to spend enough money to know, do we have something to gain here? And if you read the report, I think you will see we have a tremendous amount to gain if we can get this to work and get it to work well. So I appreciate those things. I think we need time as a council to be able to get to that point, but I don't think we have sky's the limit on time in terms of timing of the referendum. I don't think it's something we want to drag out another year. We've been dragging it out for 2 years. I know that some of my fellow members of council are like, I don't want to deal with this. There's a certain part of like, if we have the vote, we know, right? But I would be very interested to hearing from the task force, this idea of recommendations for how do we conduct a referendum and not turn it into what it was last time. Really appreciate the idea of writing to the utility board and saying, we're going to pursue a vote. Can you give us some oversight in terms of Alliant can't put out a postcard in the mail that's clearly false like they did last time. I think that would really help within our community. They can't put up a giant billboard that is clearly false. If the utility board could help us in that way. I know that Alliant once, and Andy probably knows this, they put out a mailing, or they didn't put out a mailing where the information wasn't quite correct. And the utility board made them retract that mailing. I think it was about the smart metering. And so I think the utility board can help us in that way if we ask. But I think the number one way that we that we can prevent this sort of like clash within our community is that this is coming from council now. This is something that elected officials feel is good for Decorah.
I think you had talked about having a work session at the end of January.
Right, that's one possibility, and really the intent behind that work session discussion would be council weighing these factors, and when does council see that time as appropriate? Is it in the near future? Is it in the distant future? Is it at all? That's what I envisioned that work session to be.
I would, I think what Emily mentioned about the report laying out the fact that even if the council move forward and following the recommendation from the task force that we hold a referendum, that is certainly not any long-term commitment of, millions of dollars or anything. That I think that's important, and that's clear in the report, that this is just step one in a process and it doesn't commit us to anything. I think we need to make sure that we hold that in front of the community and we all hear that. So thanks for bringing that up, Emily. The question that I had related to the recommendation that we ask for information oversight as part of any potential referendum effort. Is there a way? I mean, I think there is. Can we ask the IUB if they'd be willing to provide that prior to our vote? Say, if we voted to hold a referendum and asked you for information oversight, what would your response be? I mean, that might be good information for us as we're deliberating on this. Does that make sense, the question?
One of the questions I have before you kind of get into the weeds.
I don't think that's a weed at all, but yeah.
Okay, well, no, I know, but I want to make sure that all the council has a chance to read this, digest it, and come to the table with some thoughts. I know there's some people where it's real strong. It's a real strong thing for them. I know others, they are not as strong. And I think I want to be able to allow them to be able to read that before we start doing some of the discussion. Now, knowing that you have to do it prior to, or try and do it in conjunction with the budget, I can understand that piece too.
I think I asked you, Travis, the other day that, for lack of a better term, I guess statute of limitations, like if we had a referendum and it was a favorable referendum, the vote came out favorably, there's no like statute of limitations on that, like when that would run out or how long that would last for or anything like that. Is that true?
Right, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, that's just like establishing the telecommunications board. It's just there. We now have it.
Right.
So we don't have to act immediately should there be a vote with a positive outcome.
Right. You could act on it a year or 2 years,
Right.
5 years or whatever it would make.
I do think that is one of the ways in which we need to be talking about this narrative, right? So when we tried for the MEU before, we did it opposite to the telecommunications, right? We decided we were going to do a feasibility study, try to get all the information out to people, and then have a vote. And in some ways that backfired because you can't really get all the information until you're actually a utility. Whereas with our fiber utility, we did it the other way, where it's like, hey, we got this idea. We think it might be a good one. What do you think? Then we have the fiber utility, and then we get the feasibility study. And at that point, I think our first feasibility study didn't look so good. And so we've been waiting for things to look better, and we're still waiting for it to look perfect. And I think that if people are wondering about the city's track record, I think we've done a really good job managing that. We haven't dumped in millions of dollars. We're still not dumping in millions of dollars. Now we're waiting for another community to test the waters before we even pull the trigger on spending millions of dollars. And I think that is evidence that this city can be trusted to have a utility and to use that utility when the time is ready and the money is there and it makes sense. And in order to be ready when the timing makes sense, we need to have that vote positive, done, and checked. And then if it takes us 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, we have the ability to be nimble and move when it makes sense. And until we have that vote, we don't have that.
I'd like to hear from some of the other council, please.
I would just say I was impressed by Attorney Lynch's comments about Decorah needing to state all of the reasons why they would feel that this is a good venue to approach. Some say, well, lower rates. And in 08, that's what the communities did, and that's all they did. And it didn't get them very far. But I think Decorah has independence and green energy goals and sustainability goals with that, and a plethora of reasons why it would make sense for Decorah to pursue this. So I would hope that in the work session, we would be able to talk through what our reasoning is as to why we think it's a good idea.
How about if we just start down at that end?
I haven't had a chance to read the report, and I'll just reserve my comments for
Okay.
when I
That
time
sounds
when I
good.
do.
Ross?
I just appreciate the work and the efforts. I was able to attend some of the sessions and have appreciated the evergreen content online, to be able to watch in full and rewatch in some cases when questions arose. I think the makeup of your group and the slog in which it showed that it was at the final meeting, and the deliberation to put together the summary and whatnot is very much appreciated, because it kind of gives us a baseline for where we are coming into it, because you're a solid representation of the community, just like the previous vote was. It's not a slam dunk issue, and I appreciate the non-slam dunk report, which makes it both all the more interesting and all the more challenging. But I will echo some of my fellow council members' points about the fiber utility, because we did have the referendum with an 80% uptake rate or whatnot, and we've been pretty judicious about waiting for the right time and not bonding in a negative environment. And I think technology is catching up to the point that we see things being useful. And I strongly feel that power will be that same way, that just because you issue a strong referendum doesn't mean that the city is going to act right away to engage in a wholesale change, but maybe monitor opportunity when something can happen. And if we look at fiber and power together, the world is changing quickly, and the Internet of Things will support this power. We know that's true. We see that with our metering, whether it's smart metering for water or smart metering for power or for EV charging. And I think if we hold on to the tenets that you guys have put forth in doing diligent research, and then the IUB providing us with a level playing field to do research, then I think it would be good. But I do thank you for the slog, because it's not always fun to work in that environment, but that's what makes a good report. So thank you for all 30 some pages.
Randy?
I'm like Kirk, I want to look through it.
Okay, that sounds good. I
I think the
guess,
factors in the report mentioned and in the learning sessions mentioned about my energies and the opportunities of cooperating with other venues right here in our neighborhood is quite enthralling.
Now that you bring that up, I do think, I know that we all have limited time, but I do think that if you have not seen the My Energy talk, listening to, or
Learning
program,
session.
I think that is also worth watching along with reading the report. The report does such a good job. I would also say like watch an MEU one and watch David Lynch's one. But it is helpful, I think, just to hear if you're like doubting what My Energy said, you can hear them say it, which is impressive. And something we didn't have last time when we did this is that conversation with My Energy. We also, I think the David Lynch one is also extremely helpful and thorough.
Some
I
Travis.
mean, they're
guy
all
too.
helpful, but wait.
Some Travis guy was on that one. too.
Yeah.
I think I found David Lynch's to be extremely, informative. All along, I think my consideration has been community input and how the community might feel. We talked, I'd asked for the number of how many people had attended the sessions, which was pretty minimal. I can pass it on or at the work session. It's a concern that I have. I would say I can't help but look anything as far as financially too. I mean, I understand the piece of what that would mean to be able to maybe encourage something at the level from where for Alliant at that level. I'm not sure that, I think it'd be expensive to do that. And I know there's ways you can do that, but considering the amount that we're looking at for different things going on, that's one of the concerns I have for it. So I'll look forward to more discussion. I'd like to suggest that we do the workshop at the end of January, as we are not going to be, when do we start working on the budget?
Next week.
Next
Okay.
Monday and Tuesday, right?
Okay,
Are you thinking the 23rd, Travis, for? work
Well, either
session?
that or there's another tentative, myself and Dr. Cronin briefly touched base on a possible joint work session between the city and the school district, depending on the timing of Bolton and Mink and the North Alley plan, the delivery of that final report. So we were looking at that possibility on the 23rd.
okay.
So trying to do both, that's
But we still
too
have,
much.
I think that's
I
going to
think-
be a bit much.
Oh, yeah.
we have 2 Mondays at the end of January. though,
There
right?
is a
So we
fourth
could
and a
do-
fifth.
So we could do 2 Mondays.
It is possible. Yep.
Can I make one more plug? I do think we've now talked about an MEU. So there's going to be so much information and so many people talking now about an MEU and what Decorah is going to do. And I would highly make a recommendation to our news media, to anyone listening, and to anyone who wants to talk about an MEU to read the report, right? To get your information from the report that a group of dedicated citizens within Decorah spent the last 2 years finding out information. It is very straightforward. There are pros and cons mentioned. They are word for word, getting information from experts in the field and from our community. And so before you get on Facebook and make some comment about an MEU, do a little bit of diving into the report that we've invested Decorah resources into. And so I do hope that, I assume you'll both print the report, but you can get it on the webpage for the city of Decorah. And I highly encourage the citizens of Decorah to read the report, especially the executive summary, before making comments.
As a follow-up on that, could we put it on the website? Just right, I mean.
Oh,
we-
yeah, right at the
I
beginning.
think that would be nice. Also, we could, I do mean
Yes.
that. Yeah, instead of having to click through, I just think,
I agree.
especially in the next few weeks, it
agree.
might be very helpful. And if it's kind of an article format, so maybe we could use that as a space also to express our thanks as a council and
Oh,
as
yeah.
a city to the members of the task force.
And I don't want people to be intimidated by the fact that it's 35 pages or whatever it is long. You can
Just
get
say
through- you can-
5-page report.
You can get through it easily within an hour.
Yeah.
To get the highlights, and it's very unbiased. You guys have pointed out the pros and the disadvantages and advantages and everything. So even though you might have had a preconceived notion of how you felt about it beforehand, you've gone way out of your way to make sure that both sides are presented on this.
I'd have to say that since the first go around with the last referendum and the learning sessions that were involved there, the different municipal utilities who came and talked about how they run things, and also the videos that we have this time talking about payment in lieu of taxes and the opportunity, it is to provide the city with revenues, I think is a quite enthralling possibility for the city to be able to benefit in another way by having an MEU, or
So,
whatever the vowel is there. Also, I
Travis,
wanted to thank the committee for putting up with our council liaison. We really appreciate your working with Steve. We understand how it is working with Steve. So we thank you so much for your efforts.
I admire the mayor for knowing to put me on that for my second week on the job. So
okay, so Travis, you will set up a work session for further discussion on this.
And I don't know how those work sessions work, but if you wanted any of us to attend that, or if you
That
have
would
any
be awesome.
questions.
We
before
discussed we
we
can't
could-
vote during work sessions.
But we
Okay.
do discuss, and it would be really helpful to have any member of the task force there that could help
Oh,
with us.
Just let us know when that is scheduled, and
That'll be
I'm sure
posted
some of
too.
us can be there.
I appreciated the idea of meeting with the school administration in terms of looking and lining things. I think that's very insightful for us as a council to have those understandings of what they're thinking as well.
And
Okay.
just for Steve Zittergroen's benefit, we get into the weeds when we get into the work
Yeah,
session.
so- Okay,
Where you're going.
Thank
thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you to the committee.
Yeah,
And we'll look
thank
forward
everybody
to-
on the task force. Thank you.
We'll look forward to the future discussions. So,
I feel like we should clap for you, bow to you. Thank you.
okay. Conduct a public hearing on proposed development agreement with Brenton Hall Holdings LLC. Can you give some background on this before we open that public hearing?
Sure. So Brenton Holdings is the owner of the Bluffside Gardens project. As a reminder, so last month, council set tonight for a public hearing on a possible development agreement that had a max tax rebate of $300,000. The way it was initially discussed, and still we'll get into that with item 7. There's some still formalities trying to work out between the two attorney parties. The initial proposal is 10-year sliding scale, 190/80 on down. Currently, the attorney representing Brenton Holdings has requested that be bumped up to an 11-year with 100/100, that the first 100 is the partial. So January 1, he received a partial assessment on foundations and a couple of framed buildings. And so that's one of the things that we're working on still. But again, the max taxable tax rebate benefit would still hold at $300,000.
Okay, so I'm going to open the public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this matter? Hearing and seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Consider resolution approving development agreement with Britton Holdings LLC, authorizing annual appropriation tax increment payments and pledging certain tax increment revenues to the payment of the agreement.
So this is one council can certainly table. We needed to hold the public hearing tonight because that's when it was scheduled for. Council can either table until we get we're still debating not just that, but a couple pieces of legal language. Nothing else that's really substantial in the development agreement, but it's up to council. The resolution itself authorizes a development agreement with a max benefit of $300,000. The council could approve that, but there's also no harm in tabling should the council want to wait until that final development agreement's mutually agreed.
I would recommend tabling till it's.
I would second.
I have a motion from Neil and seconded by Olson to table this item. Any further discussion?
just quick question, Travis, do you know what the projected improved value of the property is going to be?
1 second.
Doesn't affect my vote to table, but I'd like to come armed with that information when we do take this back up.
Yep.
You can email it to me another time also. I don't want to put you on the spot like that.
Well, and I should be able to grab it here. for a second. 1.9 million.
Okay, any other further discussion? Roll call?
Neil.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Luce.
Aye.
Zittergrun.
Aye.
Hadley.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Chisel.
Motion carried. Consider resolution adopting amendment to the plan for 2014 Decorah Housing Urban Renewal Area and repealing resolution 3317.
This is the one.
Background on that?
Yeah, this is the one we were trying to get at last meeting where my background notes didn't match up with the title because the title was incorrect on the agenda. The 2014 Housing Program Revitalization Plan, that's what everyone knows is our residential tax abatement plan.
Mm.
And I had two council members ask that we postpone implementing the new schedule of currently it's 5 years, 100% full value to go in line with state code. We are changing to 5 years, 100% of the first 75,000 in value. The change that was approved by council was set to go into effect or is set to go into effect February 1. The intent giving some time for people to wrap up some projects that had taken out permits and we're trying to wrap those up. The new draft that's out there as a for consideration as requested by some council members would push that back to April 1, giving another 2 months to still button up. We have about 6 projects, right, Greg, that are currently outstanding that are nearing completion that this could potentially affect.
Can we grant those 6 projects? Can we just say, okay, these 6 projects are grandfathered? It's either all or none.
Yep, they have to have it. Yeah, they
But
have to have it.
aren't we violating state code by doing it any other way? I mean, the idea behind it was that that's what state code says we can do.
Brutal answer is we've been not in compliance with state code for several years.
I feel like you could have been more brutal than that.
Yeah. I thought I held back a little.
Yeah,
And this is really just giving people a little more time. That's all.
yeah.
I think when people started these properties, they had a good faith expectation that this would be the incentive in place when they completed them. And this seems appropriate and fair. And even if it means we're not in guidelines for another month or so.
I concur.
Okay. Thus,
So the resolution as it's drafted for considering right now would, if approved, replace that previous one approved with a February 1 implementation and set it with April 1.
So the one we're acting on now would go into effect April 1.
Correct. It
Okay.
would essentially postpone the new plan 2 more months.
I would move to approve that resolution.
Second.
Second.
motion made by Olson, seconded by Johnson. Any further discussion? Seeing, hearing none. Roll call?
Olson,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Luce.
I think I need to abstain because of a possible conflict.
Okay. Zittergrun.
Aye.
Hadley,
No.
Chisel. Neil.
No.
Pass. Okay, motion carried. Consider ordinance amending 15.12.060 Board of Appeals to stagger appointment of members. Can you give us some background on that, please?
Yes, so when the city adopted and updated Decorah building codes about 2 years ago now, the ordinance had for the creation of this Board of Appeals and in looking at getting those positions filled, we were looking at how they're structured. Anyway, long story short, the current code says 2 members will start this year, 2 members this year, 2 members this year, and it totals to 9. But code reads that it's a 5-member board. So we're correcting that error with this ordinance to say one will start each year with staggered year, or they'll all start, but they'll have staggered years. Yeah, board of 1, board of 2. No, they'll all start, but they'll have a term of 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, so that they end up all on a staggered 5-year rotation. This does then blend into the next item, but right now we're just considering the ordinance that would correct the start of this board.
And does this part of what they need to vote on, does it also state the qualifications for that board?
Those
is
are
that
already
in
in
there?
there. Yeah, those are already in there. So
Okay.
to refresh council's memory, if you're not familiar, the Board of Appeals is not the same as Board of Adjustment. This is a specific group. In code, it specifically calls out, it needs to be contractors and others with knowledge of building codes. So they have to be, it's a very special group. That's one of the reasons I would not support having 9 members on this board. That might be difficult to fill. But the premise behind this group is that if a building official interpretation of code is it can be appealed to this group. It's not a way to bypass code and appeal a code application, but if a determination from the building official, somebody believes it's not accurate, they can appeal that decision to this group and they can override it.
So they don't have regular meetings, I assume that they just
never
just
meet.
meet, they just meet when somebody appeals something?
Correct.
Okay.
And this procedure and policy is based in in Iowa,
It's actually
state, federal.
in our city code.
We adopted the state code, so it's the state code. Is it where is the precedent for the formation of this process?
Is the Board of Appeals required as part of like
Yeah.
a Board of Adjustments? for
Right. Is this a
planning and zoning?
policy?
I don't believe so, right, John?
I don't think this is state mandated. This was just in the city's ordinance that was adopted for the building code. And I think the idea is, okay, if you disagree with the building inspector's decision about something, who do you appeal that to? And it sets up this board of 5 members of people who are supposed to have a background in this area, to take a fresh look at it and decide, did the building inspector make the right call or
They're
not?
not quasi judicial, like Board of Adjustment.
Good question. I've never seen an appeal of a building inspector's decision to give you a definitive answer in that. I would imagine it would be maybe quasi judicial. I'd err on the side of caution. That's more formal until I dug into it, but yeah.
So just to backtrack a little, the creation of this board is a locally mandated something based on our code.
Right. I'm not
based in state code.
I'm not aware of state code having a requirement for this because again, state code doesn't require that the city have its own.
And this
building
was
code.
part of our adoption of the building codes.
Right.
We
So
didn't do this separately.
no,
No.
it was in our, it was in the original building code. So it's always been there. We just have never
We never, yeah, the
manned it.
clarification for me is that it's always been there. We had to have a Board of Appeal,
Mhm.
but none was ever set up.
That's right.
So that's what this is.
I would move to appeal or to amend ordinance 1512.060.
I'll second for discussion.
Motion made by Luce, seconded by Zittigruin.
I-
Discussion?
Yeah, I guess I'm curious in terms of you're saying that this is a highly specialized group of people.
Yeah. And just to be clear.
But
you-
where is that in the,
you already have a board established. So I guess for point of discussion, you have the board. there's just basically an error in the ordinance because
But we don't have any members.
We don't have anybody
right,
on
you
it.
don't have anybody on it. So
But it will
Um,
stagger the
we have a
terms. of the
cable
members
board
on-
too, but
But where in the ordinance is it written, what kind of person needs to be on there?
Well,
Because I'm
I-
in the ordinance that I'm reading, I don't see that.
yeah.
That is,
I just lost it.
it's 1512.
0.060A.
Yeah.
A.
Before we spend,
We don't have an A. We have a B, but no A.
Oh, no. You're looking at the ordinance. That's all that ordinance that's in Dropbox is doing is amending paragraph B. If you want to see paragraph A, actually look at the actual city code.
Yeah, that's
And that's not in Dropbox.
right.
No, and I can read it to you if you want that part.
Well, I guess I'm just curious what prevents, so I get the idea of having a Board of Appeals. I mean, it makes sense, but I guess what prevents a group of developers and builders? To me, there's a little bit of a conflict of interest there. Do you know what I'm saying? That if they decide that they don't like our building inspector's interpretation of code, they have a lot to benefit from how they interpret that code. So that seems like a total conflict of interest to me.
It's a catch-22. So the exact language says the, very long sentence, and who are qualified by experience and training to pass upon matters pertaining to building construction is what they talk about, the qualifications of these members. Again, this board doesn't have the ability to say, we're not going to apply that code. They have to be able to look at said building code and make their own conclusion on how that applies to an application.
Yeah, I get that. It still seems like, I mean, we live in a really small town. I get
Mm-hmm.
how if you were in a really big town and you had, 100 or lots and lots of different contractors. We don't have that many.
Mhm.
So we're going to be pulling from a group of people with that description who inherently have a conflict of interest. And I don't think that's fair to Greg. I mean, I don't know, Greg, but it does seem to me that or to the city that well, I don't actually think we need to have this type of fire escape. And I'm very sensitive to the year we've just had,
Would it-
right?
One of the questions I have is, let's say, with people who have had concerns about the building code decision, isn't that where now they would have an appeal board that if they were concerned about what, is that correct? Is that what this appeal board is for?
I think that fire escape is a good example.
Mhm.
I think that's a good example. I don't know that it's an inherent conflict of interest. You have to judge it on the facts. You could say that about the Board of Adjustment. They're citizens of this town. They know people, but just because you know somebody doesn't mean it's a conflict of interest.
But it's not your job, right? So the people, it is one of the reasons that I have fought really hard not to have people on the Board of Adjustment who are all contractors who will benefit directly from the decisions made there, right? One of the reasons that is why I am careful about who we put on there. But if you have a board where you are specifically saying contractors and people who know this type of work, they're probably doing this type of work, that is an inherent conflict of interest in my mind because you benefit. If you decide that this part of the code this isn't how we should interpret this code, and in the back of your mind, that's a $30,000 price tag for you to have to implement.
Board can't change.
No.
Right.
But
Mhm.
code is not that clear. And so it is very interpretive. It is very easily interpreted and they could interpret it. Yeah,
Would it be better if you had contractors from another town that don't do business? I mean, you need somebody that's an expert in the field, right? I mean, take
Yeah.
lawyers, for example. We
already have enough.
Yeah, but who reviews what lawyers do or what doctors do?
maybe
Other-
we should also have a lawyer on this board.
No,
Because
well,
they
no,
would
I'm
be
not.
like, oh, well, there's the
But-
legal liability you're opening yourself up to.
But do you think you should have non-experts? I mean, don't you think you need somebody that has a background in the field?
I agree.
And if I get Decorah, so go to another town or go to Minnesota,
I will say,
I guess my next question.
I guess I am interested in the idea of having both a lawyer and I mean, there is a balance there. I mean, I know you think we have too many lawyers, but
I guess my
I don't
next
really-
question would be,
just had to make fun
we
of John.
haven't had this board in the past. Is it absolutely necessary that we have this board? And we haven't
Well-
had a need for it yet.
To
but-
Ross's question, need. Yes, because it's imposed by this council. But the council could also pass an ordinance that removes this. But then again, it poses the question of if, what is your alternative path? Should you disagree with the findings of the
Right.
building official?
I've been waiting very patiently to ask this question, and this is the question I want to ask. Does staff think that this is a necessary board? And, oh, go ahead.
It's existed for 2 years on paper at least, and nobody has filled it. And quite frankly, we only stumbled upon it in its existence. So need? Probably not.
I've had people ask me, who can I appeal this to?
I do see that Cedar Rapids, Des Moines, Marshalltown, and Oskaloosa all have this as part of their building code process. So I'm guessing, because I believe in the adoption of the building code as the process, that we selected a quite blanket version of state code, because state code was what we were obligated to be compliant to, even though we didn't have a policy, right? So it was adopting building code was bringing us in compliance with what our liabilities were at the state level anyway. The fact that there are at least this many towns with building and fire board of appeals. So I think it's important to say that word fire, because I could see this appeal being used more heavily on the fire side as much as the building side, especially because our community isn't sprinkled heavily. And sprinklers come into play a fair amount more now, yeah?
That-
Greg, question to you. Yep, Greg. Yeah. You don't,
Can you give,
Check, check. It's not the type of board that can say, we don't want you to have a sprinkler system because we don't think that this particular client needs one. They have to prove it basically that based on code sections and the rules of the code, that it is not needed. Not for the fact that they just
But-
don't want one.
if it's an appeal board, they would be
Those five
disagreeing with
members
you,
have-
correct?
Those 5 members would have to research all those code sections
Yeah.
to see if I made the wrong determination.
I would just say that having experts, having other builders, other plumbers, other electricians, on this board is a good thing for all of the other builders that are in this community, because then there is some, oversight and you don't have, most builders want to have reasonable codes that they have to follow and that everybody else must follow. And I think and so having experts on this isn't going to increase your amount of development any more than, anything else. It's just, you're going to have a credible group of people who are following the rules, making sure that everyone follows the rules. Every builder, every contractor, every plumber, every electrician is following the code. And I don't see it as some sort of a way to jam development down the throats of the citizens of Decorah. I think it's more of it's a watchdog group oversight. I think it's a good thing.
I agree. I mean, it's not that I think it's, I just trying to figure out when you mentioned the qualifications to be on it. I guess in my mind, I would like to expand those qualifications. Someone brought it up. I think if we had fire people on that, it would be awesome. Like, so not necessarily contractors, but people who have to fight fires in buildings would be helpful. So in terms of like, what are the qualifications to be on that board? I guess to me, being a legal expert and being a firefighter would be good qualifications that I would accept for someone to sit on a board of appeals with this process. I mean, reading code, I mean, if you really want an expert to really read and interpret code, it's not necessarily a builder, it really is a lawyer. But I guess
So
It
Just
didn't
for-
preclude those type of people from serving, did it?
no,
Our code says that it needs to be somebody through experience or training must be able to pass upon matters pertaining to building construction. Um,
That wouldn't preclude a lawyer from serving.
Well, it would.
no,
I mean,
so-
We'd still have John for advisement to the board.
well, yeah, but he's not gonna go to every board of,
No.
Yeah.
Well, he has already.
and he would have to represent, and not only that, he would have to represent the city. I mean, he would be representing Greg.
No, not necessarily. I
Okay.
mean, yeah, that's an interesting question too.
I mean, it would be, but
Yeah, I don't know that it hurts to have a lawyer on there, but I'll tell you, if you came to me to ask about that code, I would read it and I'd probably say, well, I need to talk to an expert on it. Now, it doesn't mean that it's not relevant. No more than one, is what I'd say, unless you have a bunch of lawyers that are also a trained contractor. To me, this is where you rely upon the experts. I can see having one lawyer on there, to help guide how to do legal and
Processes
analysis
almost.
process. Yeah. I could see the benefit of that. But
We also have a city attorney that can do that for us.
I
know,
don't
I just-
disagree that the city attorney, the problem is if you are representing, if it's a board of appeals against Greg, you might be representing Greg.
Question before
Well,
us, staggering.
Exactly. The question right now for number 8 is to rectify what's the definition. Now, when you get to number 9, if you get to number 10, then you're talking about more than members. Is that correct?
Well, and 10 was just us. It was basically our advertisement of we
Okay.
need 5 people.
Okay, so then,
to-
so we're okay. We're still
So,
okay to discuss.
Is there a motion on the table?
No. Oh, yes, let me think. I think I had a motion by Steve Luce and seconded by Zittergruen, and we've been discussing. Any further discussion?
You restate the motion again.
That'd be a
please.
good idea.
Yeah, I can do it.
Can you restate the motion, please?
It was,
No, I'm asking Carrie. Sorry.
thanks, Mayor.
Approving the ordinance amending 15.12.060 Board of Appeals to stagger appointments of members. First reading.
That, we didn't have a first reading behind that, so this is a first
This will be
reading.
the first,
Okay,
yeah.
that sounds good. Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call?
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergruen.
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Jizzle, Neal,
No,
Olson.
Aye.
Okay. Motion carried. So the next one is consider appointing members of Building Code Board of Appeals. And that's a discussion that
Yeah.
we're not bringing forth.
Now you appeal for appeals.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now you appeal for people
Members.
to.
Yeah.
Apply for appeals.
Yeah.
So again, we need 5 people. Fill this board ranging from 1-year term up to a 5-year term. I'll leave it to the mayor whether she's going to let people try and elect which they want to fill. Or if you're going to choose, as 5 applications I'm sure come
Okay.
flying in, you're going to assign how many years each person
We're
will
gonna
be here,
divide 'em
right?
To all the openings we have. Hey.
Would be like 1, 3, 5.
That's how I would
Okay.
look to fill them. If you get somebody that's willing to do a 5-year term, snatch them.
we have so many contractors in this town, we could just assign them.
The thing is that do we not need any more clarification before we advertise for people to come on that? Okay,
No, that's already built into code.
so they would be applying just like anybody else applies.
Yep. 5 members whose place of business, residence, or work is located in jurisdiction served by City of Decorah, Iowa Building Department, and qualified by experience and training to pass upon matters pertaining to building construction.
Because you would have that in the advertisement
Mhm.
for seeking applicants for that.
Yep.
And they
Okay.
would not have regular meetings. They're just going to, if there's an appeal made, they can convene.
Correct.
We pencil John in for the first 5
I think John and Travis will both be at that first meeting. Yes.
My next question is if this is just the first reading, we wouldn't put this application process out until we've approved all of them.
Well, we still need 5 or 9. So this ordinance, the way it's drafted is to get it corrected back down to 5. But our code reads, we need 5 people now. The section we're correcting, the way it's termed, it says that 2 members will be appointed for each term. And then the 5th year, we'll have just
Okay.
1 appointment.
So it has
That's
to do with
9
the-
people.
It has to do with the staggering of terms.
It's just correcting the staggering of terms,
Okay.
correct?
Gotcha.
Does anyone else on the council have any interest in delaying the actual appointment of a board until we had a chance to discuss if the makeup in the ordinance as stated represents our continued wishes?
I would be interested in that.
I guess that was one of my questions, so.
Like you,
Forward with experts in the field. Be the board. I mean, they were not all contractors. I know, Rick Trenton, who used to manage Spon and Rose, was a certified inspector, so there would be somebody that
Right.
had background, but he wasn't an actual contractor.
Well, there's lots of people who work for contractors who probably would have relevant experience too.
People that are non-contractors that might have that type of background, they've just,
I,
right,
right.
so.
I trust the people that we'd pick to be on it would be qualified people. And
Does the ordinance give us fairly wide latitude to determine that someone's qualifications meet the ordinances? I mean, does that make sense, John? The question, like, we're talking
That's
about
what I'm worried
architects.
about.
Can we actually put an architect on the board based on the wording of the ordinance?
Sure.
I mean, opens up the possibilities. It says, who are qualified by experience and training to pass upon matters pertaining to building construction. So I had in my mind contractors, but I think, it's brainstorming here. There are other people out there that would qualify.
Then I'm
And is
okay with
that-
the idea, although we do have plenty of things that our staff can do that can make people's lives difficult, and they don't have a board to appeal to beyond coming to their council and asking us to intervene. And so I was just curious why this is such a special case, given that there hasn't been a need for it in 2 years. And I'm particularly wondering that, looking at the end of our agenda and seeing a lot of vacancies on boards already. So that's what I was kind of balancing when I asked the question. Maybe it's worth giving it a shot. And if we can't find enough willing volunteers, we come back to the issue. Because I do want people to have redress. It may just be that their recourse is to come to us and say, Greg is clearly making a wrong decision. And then it becomes a matter for staff and so forth. Does that
Okay.
make sense, Mayor?
Yes, and we have 2 more readings on it, so.
No,
All
we
right.
don't have 2 more readings on that section. We only have 2 more readings on the staggering of their terms, not on the actual code. I mean, the actual ordinance. The ordinance exists. The only thing we're doing
Okay,
is
who's
changing-
on? Now I'm confused.
Okay, the ordinance exists.
Yeah,
Right? What Steve just brought up, is anyone else interested in actually looking at the ordinance to change the ordinance beyond just when they stagger and when they get off this board? I am interested in it only to make sure that it's written broadly enough that I do like the idea of architects, engineers. I do think a firefighter would be a good person on that board. Because I think that while they don't have information on building construction, they clearly have information on safety code of what a building needs to be and what happens if it's not, right? If you think that it's written in a way that allows for that, then I'm comfortable, but I'm,
okay. Do you feel that's the case?
I think it'd be loose enough. I mean, experience and training to pass upon matters pertaining to building construction. Certainly, I think engineers, architects, they certainly qualify. Somebody that's doing the design lumber ordering at Spawn and Rose, I think fits that bill.
Mhm.
And I do think you can make the argument for somebody in the fire service to be able to fit this role too.
Okay, so are we on now to number 11?
Once you say we are.
Yeah, let's go on to number 11 then. Consider an ordinance rezoning business park from C5 office park commercial to M2 limited industrial district, second reading.
Lewis would move the second reading.
Second.
Moved by Luce, seconded by Zittigran. Have there been any comments since the first one?
None received.
Any other comments? Roll call?
Luce.
Aye.
Zittergruen.
Aye.
Hadley.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Chisel. Neal.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Mayor, can I move to waive and adopt?
Mhm.
I move that we waive the third reading and adopt the ordinance.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion made by Zittergruen, seconded by Olson for moving and adopting. Any further discussion? Roll call?
Zittergruen.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Hadley.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Chisel.
Aye.
Neal.
Aye.
Luce.
Aye.
Okay. Vacancies on the following boards and commissions. These are for advertising for applications. I believe we haven't gotten any applications thus far. Telecommunication is one member. We have one opening on the Civil Service Commission with resignation of Rhonda Alberts. And then we have two on the Human Rights Commission, correct? Do you have any other
And
comments?
those two will be upcoming. They're not, February 1st is the reappointment. And so that's when those will come open.
And that's on the Human Rights, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, so people are interested, please take a look at these commissions and see if they fit, then you'd like to be on them, put in an application and submit it to the city clerk, finance officer at the office. Okay, city manager, department heads, reports.
Hopeful to get initial budget prep materials out to council. I'm hopeful by tomorrow. My schedule is pretty clear. Carrie and I are working on some last things to button up before getting those out to council. Again, I'm hopeful that's tomorrow. And then I already touched briefly on communicated with the school on a joint work session to discuss the North Alley area planning efforts once we get that final report back from Bolton and Mink. And then short of that, that's all I have.
And do you have an expectation date for that report?
I did talk briefly. Mondays and Wednesdays work best for the school because their extracurriculars
Well,
are
I
all
meant the
around-
report from Bolton.
Oh, sorry. Tentatively, the council will have something at the January 19th or 17th meeting, excuse me.
Thank you.
Carrie?
Just wanted to announce that we will be start taking online payments for water by the end of the week, hopefully as everything goes planned. Also, I put out an email quite a while ago about the budget saying we're trying to go electronic unless someone definitely felt like they needed to have books. I have two people saying books. Is everybody else okay with electronic?
I was going to ask for a book. So you have three.
So 4?
I would like a book.
Does everybody want a book?
It's hard to stare at a screen.
It really is. I can't.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'll have a book. Is it gonna be Excel? Is it gonna be Excel electronically?
No, it'll be, so if you've used, when I take the council packet, make a PDF, if you've ever used the bookmark function,
Yep.
and on the left side, each title, that'll reference each section within the book and the specific pages as well. So that's the format the electronic version would
So
come in.
when you're talking about book page, we'll be able to go to the bookmark on the PDF reader.
Bookmark on the PDF reader or be able to select, in the little cell at the top that you want to go to.
We have, will we have
Yeah.
access to the worksheet so that we can manipulate things and play that game ourselves?
So
Sim
the-
City?
So,
You may
in
want-
some fashion, but actually the Department of Management has changed the structure. And Carrie is actually, this is one of the reasons for the delays as well. When Carrie inputs the functions, she has to input them directly to the Department of Management website, and it's no longer an Excel spreadsheet.
Do you have an Excel spreadsheet of the proposed budget that we can play with while we're in a meeting?
Or can you export it to a CSV or something?
You know,
Because when
With-
I am creating those Excel, that is through our software. So
Yeah,
it's not that we're entering that information directly into an Excel. So no.
I guess what I'm asking, is the budget going to look like it did last year? I mean, or is it a whole new?
parts
form?
of it.
So we'll have essentially those Excel looking sheets. We'll have the report up front.
You'll have some additional information to help
Digest.
term I want to digest and kind of summarize all the pages behind it. But yes, those, all the line, all those pages that are all just the account lines, that's all standard issue out of our software. There's no changing that really.
So-
Short of us creating a new Excel spreadsheet
Yeah.
and manually entering that.
I'm okay with it electronically then. If it's-
okay, you got that cleared up?
Yeah.
And anything else? Okay, department heads?
Would it be a conflict if when I'm phone calls out and about, let them know that those positions are open?
It's a
No.
mayoral.
I mean, that's
appointment.
advertising,
I
yeah.
don't
Yeah.
think-
I mean,
I just didn't know if it,
we let people know all the time when boards and commissions are.
I just didn't know if it looked like a conflict, like I'm looking for the good old boy network. kind of.
I think so.
No, I mean, I think because this is an appeal process for people. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I do. You think people are gonna feel that way?
I think, Greg, if you let everyone know and not just some people.
Yeah,
Oh, I have to let everybody know?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay,
That's, that's what I was gonna do. It's just,
I think it's long. But it is Decorah, so I can see if you.
I know 5 guys. I'll let everybody know as I'm talking to people, and I talk to different architectural
Yeah.
firms too around the area.
Everyone at Spawn and Rose.
Everyone at Spawner.
We often have to recruit people to be on the Board of Adjustment or the
Yeah.
Planning and Zoning Commission.
yeah.
Not everybody wants to do it. So
You
if
can also
find
pick
people who want to.
Human rights openings and civil service and telecommunications.
I
Okay.
will advertise it all.
Perfect.
Okay, anybody else from the department heads that have anything to say? Yeah, I'm gonna go first. I just wanted to acknowledge the fire department's involvement in the recent massive fire in Spring Grove, their contributions there, as well as Fort Atkinson, it was a house fire, and Ocean, there was a fire as well. The type of equipment that we have was very valuable. And from the Spring Grove one, they were very obliging at being able to keep, it was a ladder truck that in a warm place up there because it was terribly cold. And to drive it back down again, they were able to leave it there till everything got situated. But I wanted just to acknowledge that. Okay, Kirsten, do you have anything?
Just want to wish everybody a happy new year and hope that Decorah has a wonderful, great, fantastic 2023.
Okay, Emily.
Happy New Year, everyone. And I will stress my thoughts about Facebook and comments. Sometimes I see stuff on Facebook and I just want to say, hey, check out the city website and read our articles and listen, get the news from the city in terms of what's happening, not necessarily Facebook gossip. So other than that, yeah, happy New Year and thanks everybody and looking forward to a fun budget year. Woo-hoo.
Randy,
Nothing this evening, Mayor.
Steve Lewis,
I have nothing, Mayor.
Steve Zittigron,
Happy New Year.
Ross Hadley,
Nothing, Mayor.
Kurt Johnson.
Nothing, Mayor.
Okay. Motion to